webinar series on Trust Matters. Today, you have tuned in to Human Resource Matters, Working and Managing Remotely. And we want to thank you all for being with us. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. One, we are recording this, so for those of you that wish to watch or share it with friends afterwards, please know that that will be available on the Water Coalition's website. Also want you to know that just for clarity purposes, everybody is on mute for the duration of the program other than our speakers. If you have questions, and we do encourage as you listen to our panelists today to ask questions, we'll have a piece of the program that'll reflect those questions towards the tail end, but ask those in your chat box within Zoom. We have folks that are behind the scenes, those folks that make everything really magical and happen. But they'll be batching those questions and giving those to me, and I'll share those with the panelists when we get to the Q&A portion. So with that, I want to kind of formally say thank you again, and to our sponsors. Today, this particular program is being sponsored by the Moulton Niguel Water District, so we thank you very much, Moulton Niguel, for that. But as we always do as well, and want to make sure we say thanks to our founding sponsors, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, the Irvine Ranch Water District, Metropolitan of Southern California, Los Angeles County Public Works, the County of Riverside, West Basin Municipal Water District, the Inland Empire Utilities Agency, and a brand new founding sponsor as of this week. I'd like to welcome and thank the County of San Bernardino. So with that, I would like to be able to go into and share with you who the experts we have today for our program. First, we have Diane Pitman. Diane is the Director of Human Resources for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. You'll find this theme throughout all of our speakers, that Diane has more than 25 years of experience in the field of human resources, and she is responsible for ensuring that Metropolitan's workforce is ready for, she says, the challenges ahead, but I think we're going to get to hear a little bit about the challenges of today and how those are implicated for the challenges ahead. But actually, I find it interesting because Diane is a product of Metropolitan's succession planning initiatives. This is somebody who literally kind of grew up within the organization, took on various challenges and opportunities, and is now the head of human resources for Metropolitan, where she has been in charge since 2015. Diane also, prior to Metropolitan, worked in, I love this, banking, technology, and in other international HR assignments. So if we are struggling with our Paycheck Protection Plan loan, we're going to circle back with you on that as well, I understand, Diane.
Okay.
Also with us, Sandra Kerl. Sandy is the General Manager of the San Diego County Water Authority. Sandy joined the Water Authority as the Deputy General Manager back in 2009, and she served as Acting General Manager from March through November of 2019, where she was then appointed by the Board of Directors and now holds the post as General Manager. Again, Sandy has more than 25 years of progressive responsibility and experience in all aspects of municipal government, not just within water management. She served as the City Manager of La Mesa and has broad experience with city management, extensive knowledge in organizational issues, and a pragmatic understanding of capital project management and delivery. Throughout her career, she has been active in places like the International County Management Association and served as chair of the San Diego City and County Managers Association and the San Diego Regional Training Center. So Sandy, thank you for being with us. We also have with us Joone Lopez. Joone is the General Manager of the Moulton Niguel Water District, which provides water, wastewater, and recycled water services to 6 cities in South Orange County. Before joining Moulton Niguel, she served as the General Manager of the Calaveras County Water District, located in Northern California. Joone's prior experience includes working in Apple Valley Ranchos Water Company as an Assistant General Manager and serving as a Deputy General Manager for Central Basin Municipal Water District. Joone, well, I love Joone's resume. She's a board member of pretty much everything in California that has the word water in it. So just know she's very active, busy on not just local, but on regional water-related issues. But she is also a founding member of the California Data Collaborative, which is a nonprofit which represents some 21 million Californians focused on leveraging data and technology to enhance water management policies statewide, which is one of those new and innovative things in the water industry. And then the cleanup for us today is Scott Darrell. Scott is part of the social work adjunct faculty at USC, specializing in coaching and training for emerging professionals in their leadership roles. Scott draws upon, yet again, people, 25 years of experience as a leader in Southern California's community development industry, teaching courses in social policy, professional leadership, coaching, consultation, and entrepreneurship. He serves as faculty lead of the online community immersion courses. He started his firm as well, Darrell Consultancy, where he helps build leadership capacity with individuals and groups who are looking to become better leaders within our community. So we welcome Scott as part of our program today. So with that, more of you and less of me is always a great theme when we do these things at the Coalition. So I'm going to turn over to Diane Pitman to sort of set us up and introduce us to today's topic. Diane?
Thank you, Charlie, and good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here to talk to you about this current situation. And the way that I approached this presentation from my standpoint was to talk about business transition planning. I think all water agencies have an emergency response plan. They all have a business continuity plan, but I don't think any of us planned for a transition back from a stay-at-home order. So this is something that's new that I want to share with you. And from my perspective, there's many webinars out there. The CDC has great guidelines. But when I think of my role in situations such as this, it's to care for the people of the organization at all levels, but also to support the functions. So my presentation is going to be focused on the human element of the transition process. Next slide, please. Do I need it? Oh, there we go. Perfect. So the first thing I would tell you to do is monitor reality. It is changing on a regular basis, but the governor does have 4 defined stages for resilience. There are many communications from public health agencies, but also you need to take into consideration your agency needs. From my perspective, there's no need to rush to a return to normal because I don't think we're ever going to be considered normal again. If your current plan is working, keep it. Any action that you take, whether you decide to keep people out or decide to bring them back, is going to have consequences that you're going to have to deal with. So really decide what makes sense for you. And if you remember that the employees are watching your actions, they will appreciate if you're looking out for them. But what makes sense for your agency? How do you measure productivity? Is a teleworking arrangement working? Is it making you just as productive as if you were in the office? As much as we all miss seeing each other, for now, safety is the most important thing. Now there are 2 or 3 accommodation issues I could go into, but that could be a whole webinar on its own. So all I'll tell you is that there are legal risks for bringing people back to work, and accommodation is a big piece of that. And ensuring that employee safety is still the most important thing. And then remember, transition doesn't happen overnight. It's an ongoing process. And as you can see from this week, we had a plan last week that's probably going to have to be revised based on actions taken this week. Next slide, please. So be realistic. It's not like turning on a light switch. It's a dimmer. It's going to take time. And a measured approach is the best approach because you cannot anticipate some of the consequences that might be happening. And if you can take a measured approach, different concerns can be addressed. Also, build what-if scenarios and solutions to help guide protocols. We actually started this process at Metropolitan, but again, just as of Monday, we've had to make some adjustments. So you might have to have multiple scenarios so that you can be prepared for what might happen in the future. I would recommend you involve multiple stakeholders. Our business transition team has representatives from safety, communications, finance, business continuity, employee relations, and many others. Involving multiple stakeholders will actually help make sure that you are addressing many concerns. Multiple ideas and multiple individuals on a team make sure that things don't slip through the cracks. I would also recommend, if you have bargaining units, that you have regular communication with them. I have a weekly call with the bargaining unit presidents at Metropolitan to go over recent issues that are going on with employees' health and safety. But this is also an opportunity for me to hear from them and find out what their members are worried about and concerned about. And that way we can try to address it before it becomes a problem. I know this is pretty obvious and it's not always easy to do, but this is an opportunity for employers to build loyalty, employee loyalty, based on how they're being treated. That human element is important, and employees are watching how communications are made and how decisions are made, understanding that there are financial issues that are really heavily involved in this situation. And then finally, technology has changed all of our worlds. I don't think I can imagine 2 months ago having a Zoom webinar like this. And so I'm going to encourage you all to embrace it because I think it's going to be here for a while. Next slide, please. So my final thought, HR professionals are even more important now. If you thought back to the 90s or the 2000s, HR was seen as compliance driven or the police. And then of course you look forward and a few years ago, they were heavily involved in the Me Too movement. And then just more recently, before this current crisis, we were concerned about skill gap shortages. And you'll see that 80% of chief executives worry about skill shortages still today. But partner with your HR professionals. It is their job to keep employees healthy, maintain their morale, and oversee a vast teleworking environment, an experiment actually. And 60 to 70% of my time is focused on COVID right now. And the issues raised by COVID, they fall into our HR wheelhouse. Leaves of absence, accommodation, employee communication, retention, employee services. And I know that the economy is in a bad place, and unfortunately there's a lot of individuals who've been laid off. But if you can and you have the opportunity, now is the time to hire because you will find some really good candidates out there. And one last thing I'd like to say in closing, you know, I think back to the beginning of March, and we were planning for what we were going to do to respond to the coronavirus or the COVID-19 crisis. And we were planned, we were ready. Myself and the executive team at Metropolitan got together, put a plan together to send people home, telework, micro team rotation, and we implemented that plan on the 16th. And then the next day, the governor implemented his stay-at-home order. And it actually disrupted all of our plans. And I'm not sure why, because they were pretty well aligned, but it just shows that if you don't have things thought out and planned, then you could be struggling a little bit. And that's why I encourage you to put a transition plan together now before you need it. Thank you.
So that's a great beginning, Diane. Thank you for that. And so this issue, as you described, about motivating and having a workforce that is distributed, Sandy, from your perspective as a general manager, how are you experiencing this, and what are you doing down at San Diego County Water Authority?
Great, Charlie. Thank you for the opportunity to chat a little bit. I think Diane did a great job about talking about the next phase and the transition phase. I want to spend a moment and just kind of recap where we've been, because it's quite extraordinary, and I don't think any of us could have anticipated this type of event. Wildfires seem to be the biggest disaster that we've had to deal with, and we thought that was tough, but that's kind of done, over and done. This has a long tail, and I think we need to recognize how we as an industry have really responded incredibly to this situation and continue to operate and deliver critical services to the community. Next slide. So on March 12th, 100% of our 242 person workforce worked on site. Next slide. And by March 16th, 74% of our employees, or 178 employees, moved immediately to remote work, leaving approximately 65 working on site, primarily at our Escondido facility. If you had have told me that this could happen and would happen and that we wouldn't miss a beat in terms of operations, I would have not believed it, but we did it. Next slide. So how did we do it? Basically, within 9 business days, we were able to achieve 74% of our water authority workforce into teleworking. I sent my first email to the employees on March 5th about COVID, saying this issue is growing. We're going to be looking at what to do. And a week and a half later, we closed our facilities to the public on March 16th, activated our EOC, and isolated our operators to protect their health. And then on the 17th, I announced the move to limited staff and telework. And by Thursday, the 19th, we've moved our staff. Our IT staff was amazing. I think they'd actually been, we didn't know this, but I think they'd been waiting for an event like this. We had the tools and the systems in place. And I'll tell you a funny story. I'm very structured in how I begin my day, and I have certain things that I do in the morning to get me prepared and make sure I'm plugged into what's going on around the world. And every time I turn on my computer, our Microsoft Teams would come up, and I'd be so irritated because I'm like, when am I ever going to use that? And it had to wait a few minutes for it to clear out. Well, now I can't imagine life without Microsoft Teams. So our IT folks had really put a lot of things in place to be able to allow us to work remotely. We deployed 110 devices in addition to employees who already had surfaces. We did 108 VPN connections, and we deployed quite a bit of additional equipment after the initial move. But when I say it has been seamless, it has absolutely been seamless. And I think I was saying, you may have heard me before this session started, I kind of feel exhausted at the end of every day, and I wonder why. And it's because everything that we're doing is brand new. It's not only are we carrying out the work of the organization as we normally would, but we're doing it in a completely different mode. And the technology has really been a key to allowing this to happen. Next slide. So this is just a timeline that I wanted to share with you of the dates that things happened at the authority, overlaid with the COVID data from the County of San Diego. This is to provide a visual of the timing of some of our key actions. The first flag on February 27th, first communication on COVID and second flag on 3/16, we closed our facilities. And 3/17, we limited our staff operations. The third flag on the 19th, the Water Authority moved the majority of their staff, moved the majority of the staff to remote work. The stay-at-home order was issued by the governor. One of the things that I was very appreciative of is that we were a little bit ahead, so we didn't have chaos when the governor made the announcement. And then on the fourth flag on 3/26 is when we had our first virtual board meeting. And when I talk about doing things differently, I have 36 members on my board of directors. And to move immediately to a remote board meeting was a monumental effort. And I will say that it went fairly seamlessly. And we've now had 2 remote board meetings. We will have our third at the end of the month. And I suspect that we'll be in this operating mode at least for another couple of months, maybe even possibly to the end of the year. So the next, and as you see on that slide also, as the cases continued to go up, we were in a very good position of protecting our employees, their health and safety, protecting the public with our facility being closed, having our critical staff and operating the system on sort of altered shifts and having them isolated. We have not had one incident of COVID. And in fact, in San Diego County, none of the water agencies have had a case of COVID. So we're very thankful. It's allowed us all to operate our system seamlessly. The other thing that we did is we contacted our retired operators in case we had people go out sick to see if they could come in. All of them are available. So we have sort of a cadre of folks as backup in case we need to have that going forward. Next slide. So really kind of in looking back in the 8 weeks, which seems like about a year to me, even though it's been about 8 weeks, how did we get success? It really, and how do we keep our teams motivated and accountable and keep the on-ground teams healthy and safe? Really clear and frequent communication has been critical. Immediately, I started a weekly email to the employees about what was happening with COVID. And then once a week, I have a teleconference with all the employees where I share new information. We've shared pictures, we've shared stories, really engaging folks. One of the things that's so different about this is that our work life and our personal life have merged. And frankly, for most of my career, your personal life and your professional life did not merge at all. And now we're front and center. We have kids running in the background, babies crying, different logistics on getting equipment set up, backgrounds. Everybody has a different background. And so it has been really helpful to have these weekly all hands calls. They're recorded, so our folks that are out in the field can view them after the live session, and that's really been critical. We also have a weekly newsletter that goes out from HR of various resources, trainings, and that has been very well received by the employees. We've also put inspirational things in there. One of the things I'm a bit obsessed about right now is the work of Brene Brown, and she has podcasts called Unlocking Us that she's doing free, which really focus around all of the issues that employees are dealing with in terms of anxiety, loneliness, and just really great, mostly 30-minute podcasts that the employees have really enjoyed and has really helped them through it. Since teleworking, I've had a daily executive team meeting. We meet for an hour, go over issues. It's been a wonderful way to connect, and also for making sure that we're all on the same page and sending the same messages. As I'm sure you know, one of the things that can be deadly is people getting different information or different messages about what the direction is. And this has really helped and really eliminated silos that we've had previously. Prior to this event starting, we had been focusing on culture and culture changes. I did the first employee engagement survey that's ever been done at the Water Authority. And going through this work, they typically say it'll be about 3 to 5 years before you actually change culture. I think this incident is moving us much more quickly along that culture change about things employees are looking for, which is teleworking, flexibility, engagement, managing to results as opposed to by policy, and a whole lot of other things. So I guess the other thing I would say is there's some silver linings in all of this. Obviously, the use of technology has been critical. We have focused on Microsoft Teams because of the security issues around it, and it's worked very well. And because we are more than just a water agency, we also partnered with the San Diego Food Bank and raised money to help our community. This also helped keep our employees engaged in what they can do to help beyond their daily work activities. One of the messages from me to the employees is that while this is challenging, we're very fortunate to have jobs. We have a lot of people who are out of work that never imagined themselves in that situation. And sort of helping to think outside of ourselves, I think, has helped balance some of the challenges and the anxiety that everybody's been dealing with from their own perspective. And then 2 weeks after we began teleworks, I started my Wednesday water talks with email that I send out to CEOs, elected officials, agency executives, and small business leaders and key stakeholders focusing on COVID-19 and response activities. And one of the things that we've taken an opportunity is we've all struggled with people having concerns about the safety of tap water. And then we've been able to actually drive this message home that the tap water is safe, you should be using it. You don't need to buy bottled water. And with our member agencies, we began a campaign of Trust the Tap. We've also been able to put flyers in each of the food bank bags that says you can trust the tap and you don't need to use bottled water. So really trying to look at this as an event that while it's very difficult, there are things that we can benefit from out of this, and how do we make some positive movement based on this challenging situation. So with that, I would conclude my comments, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you today.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks for sharing that, and a difficult task on a very short timeline. It's very interesting as you show those graphs about how the disease had taken off, but those implementation steps very early on were very important. So let me turn now to Joone Lopez. Joone, based on sort of what you've heard thus far, I mean, you guys do a great job, but how do you bring Moulton Niguel? How do you bring people together when you have this very sudden jerk within the or disruption within the economy and within the healthcare system?
Thanks, Charlie. And thank you for all the people behind the scenes at the Southern California Water Coalition for making this happen. And thank you all for joining us. It's so weird not to be able to see everyone that's out there, but it's good that we're still communicating. And I really appreciated following Diane and Sandy because I was taking a lot of notes. They said a lot of great things, but also it reinforces some of the things that we're doing and thinking is on track. So connectivity and accountability, how do you do that when we're all spread apart and we're not connected by a location? Because while teleworking does work, there are certain things that we do miss by not being in the same place together. There's certainly the morale, the teamwork, the fun, and you also learn how to resolve conflicts, and how to communicate through those difficult situations and work as a group and bring people closer and cross-train because you're all sitting around the table and you're batting around ideas and brainstorming. So while you can do that virtually, there is some things that are missed by not being physically together. So when we're apart, how do we stay connected, motivated, and how do we hold ourselves accountable? Because we still have a very critical job to do and we can't languish. So for me, it comes down to 3 C's. I like to always boil things down very simply. And it's culture, communication, and creativity. And both Diane and Sandy talked about the importance of culture, the human element. If people know that the leadership, the management team, the board of directors, if employees know that you care and you have to show that, it's not just what you think, it's what you show. And if they know that you care because you've been doing it year after year, in times like this, particularly in crisis, is where you reap the benefits. And so I can't emphasize enough the importance of building a strong culture of commitment, culture of kindness, culture of commitment to each other as well as to the public that we serve. And we spent many hours and years building this, and it's really been helpful during this time because there are opportunities to take advantage of some of the things that are in place now because of the COVID response. And it's human nature sometimes to take advantage of certain situations, and some will even abuse a situation. And this is where that culture is so important. And for our organization, we always have our honesty, effort, respect, one team. We call it our hero model. And whatever your model is or however you approach your culture building, I think it's really important because this is a prolonged event, like Sandy said. And the human part, like Diane said, is so critical. So if you can build it further, I think it's an important focus as we talk about so many of these other things that we can't lose sight of that. And especially with labor organization, Diane mentioned her weekly calls, and we've built a very strong relationship with labor organization. I've always seen them as our ally, not as our adversary. And so when this time things are changing, work schedules being modified, you build that trust. So that trust exists among the employees and with the labor organizations. And I remember holding our last in-person all hands. So every month, get all the employees together in this big room and we talk. I give them information, give them updates, but we also have a little fun because it's important to laugh and enjoy each other's company. And I remember saying, hey, things are going to be different for different people. Some people will get to work from home. Some people will have to still report to work. So don't compare yourself. We all have different function, different roles, different expectation when it comes to that particular job category. And this is something that we instill from years and years is don't ever compare yourself to others. Just worry about yourself and celebrate and be happy for other people's goodness and their good fortune. So when we went to this different modified schedule, because our field crews had to still go to work, they were on split schedule, but we had a lot of the non-field staff working from home. And there's always, right, the grass is greener on the other side. So they're like, oh, you get to work from home and I have to be out here. And this is where, again, that culture was really helpful in taking all of that out. And people were just very thankful, because even before the stay-home orders, months before, we started talking about the virus. And as Diane mentioned, that early communication, when people know that you care, and I've always emphasized the safety being first and foremost. And if they believe that they trust you, whatever the outcomes of that action, they buy into. And that was really important. So culture, I can't emphasize enough, is very, very critical, whether it's a crisis or the day-to-day operation. The next is communication. And I loved Sandy's example, because some of them I do, and some of them you're doing that I'm going to copy, because it's so important to maintain that trust. And when people know what's going on, it really alleviates the angst. It's when people are dealing with the unknown, the fear, that creates this bigger worry and anxiety. And so we started the communication early. And even though we're not together, we started doing virtual all hands. So we're using Microsoft Teams, and I'm at home on video, and I talk to the employees. And it's not the same, obviously, because I can't see them, and I love to see them, but it's better than nothing. And then we have different employees pop up on screen. So we have this one wellness segment by one of our field guys. And so he's giving health tips and showing some exercises that you can do at home. And this way you make people feel connected. And just like Sandy, I do weekly email or video communication to all staff in between these virtual all hands, and talk to the board officers at least once a week. We have a scheduled call, but all the calls in between. With our management staff, we talk every day just to see how things are going. And, you know, Diane mentioned the importance of HR. And again, that's another point I can't emphasize enough. To me, the human element is the most critical element. So HR for us has always been involved in strategic planning, knows the organization inside out, and everyone knows that HR is really speaking for me. And there's that trust that's built with our HR department. And they've been incredibly awesome, because they really do care about the people, and it really has taken a lot of the work off of my plate, because they're handling everything. And little things like fun things. So we've encouraged employees to share video, whether they're at work or whether they're at home working or whether with their family. And we release these once a day. And so during the weekdays, everyone looks forward to seeing their colleagues and coworkers at home or at work doing different things. And it just makes us feel just a little bit more connected on a daily basis. And also we're doing fun things like face mask making challenge, so that there's a lot of people who already made face masks and see the kinds of talent that we have out there. And we are starting our Moulton's Got Talent. So you submit a video of yourself doing whatever. You could cook, you could paint, and just to let people know that we are still people, and we still care, and we still want to see each other and want to keep that relationship going. And then of course there's the board meetings that we're doing virtually, and you know, it's a different reality, like Sandy said, but it's working. And again, I do miss my board members. I know that sounds funny to some, but I do miss all of them. But in the meantime, again, we just try to stay connected through the communications. Then the other thing is like even birthday cards. You know, I like to send birthday cards to employees, and they thought during this time somehow that was going to stop. And the continuity of things that you used to do is really important, because that familiarity, things are very different and things will never go back to normal. However, there are certain things that never change, and that's what keeps us together. And last but not least is the creativity, and not just the fun things that I talked about, like the videos or the face mask, but how can we use the technology in a way that makes us feel more connected? What are the different platforms? I've heard of people doing Zoom cocktail hours with different people, and that's great. Have fun things. I participated in a webinar the other day where you can go into breakout sessions. So there's a lot of ways to utilize technology and just good ideas for creativity. And I encourage my employees to come up with ideas like, what's a fun thing that we can do? How can we stay connected? And just during this time to think differently and use our imagination to survive this very prolonged period, and also keep some positivity, because truly it is tragic when you look at what is happening from a health-wise standpoint, from the economy, And we're not laughing because we don't care about those, but we are laughing to keep our mental health, to say there's a lot of stuff going on, but let's stay positive. And part of that is, what can we do to help the situation? And the other way that you come together, and this sort of goes through culture, communication, creativity, is what can we all do together? And we pulled together to donate. And this is just employees contributing for funds for a hospital in our service area, Mission Hospital, because we knew that these medical professionals, the frontline workers that are risking their lives constantly, we wanted to show them that we care. And even though we can't do anything to help them, here's a way. And we raised about $5,000 in less than a week. And that made us, again, feel connected, because we all came together to do something very good and positive. And the last point is the example that Sandy gave about keeping connected with your civic leaders and other organizations around you. I think that's really important, because relationship, as many of you know, is really important to me. And during this time when we're disconnected, it's a little easy to lose that touch, because now we're not going to conferences, we're not networking the same way, and making sure that we don't lose sight of that and figure out ways to talk on the phone or on the Zoom or on FaceTime. Because especially right now, as we all need to pull together, having that network, academic institution, all these different organizations, private sectors, environmental groups, government agency, we all need to pull together to make sure that the critical service that we provide is maintained and ideally enhanced from this crisis, so that we can make the most of this as an opportunity and be better going forward as industry and as people. And I know Scott's going to go after me, and I didn't get a chance to talk about Scott, but he's got some really great things to say, because when we do the pre-planning, I learned a lot from him, and I've shared that, and your ear must be burning, Scott. So I'm anxious for you to start. And I just appreciate everyone tuning in, and thank you, Southern California Water Coalition, for putting this together. Thanks.
Joone, thank you very much. So, boy, Scott, that's quite the buildup as we transition there for you. You've heard from each of our leaders within the institutions that provide water. I mean, you get to sit on the academic side and as a consultant side. What have you heard from these folks, and what lessons should we be taking away from this?
You know, I'm inspired by all of these stories in terms of the rapid response and meeting your consumers' needs as well as your employees. And you know, I think I want to. I'm going to add a fourth C to Joone's comment of her list of 3 C's, and talk a little bit about compassion, but really for a particular reason. And you know, the examples that Sandy gave and Diane around, you know, how quickly your organizations responded, right? Did things you didn't think you'd ever be able to do, right? Get 75% of your workforce working from home in 2 weeks or whatever. I mean, that's crazy, right? How did these things happen? And I saw stories like this over and over again with my clients of just really quick change, right? Through March, early April. Here's my concern though, is I feel like over the last 2 to 3 weeks and conversations I'm having looking through the summer, is I'm concerned about a really steep decline in morale moving forward. And so I'm hearing great examples of all these things that we're doing, right, to respond immediately, to continue our services, to try to kind of keep things moving forward. I'm wondering if it's not enough to sustain what we're all we realize is that there is no new normal anymore, right? We don't know where we're going from here. As Diane said, plan again, and plan even more times, because we just don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to get a little dorky professory on you here for a second, and that, you know, I think part of what my theory is, and here part of what we're experiencing is a little bit of Groundhog Day. You know, you folks like the movie Groundhog Day, you know, Andy McDowell, Bill Murray, one of my favorite movies, right, where you experience the same day over and over again. I'm hearing this a lot from a lot of people, right? This experience of kind of the infinite present. I know I'm experiencing it myself, where we don't have a whole lot to look forward to. We don't know what the future is going to be, right? I don't have that anticipation of my summer vacation. I desperately want to get on the surfboard, but I don't know when I ever can do that again, right? And so I think many of us are just feeling this weird time warp, right? Where are we? Where are we going? And so my theory here is that, you know, whether you're employed or unemployed, whether you're experiencing overwork or underwork, a lot of us are just kind of feeling lost and exhausted. Sandy kind of somewhat jokingly said but prior to us starting, of just how tired she is, right? It's really common. So that's my concern, right? As we're looking forward over the next month or 2 or 3, how do we fight against this potential of a steep decline in morale? I think all the things that you're doing now are great. Perhaps think of this in terms of amping it up another 10, 20, even 30% through the summer months. You know, many people have already talked about the importance of communication. You know, I think you had a seminar already in terms of communication. I would say double down on it, right? Do everything that you're already doing in these great examples, but maybe even think of it at a higher level of transparency, right? Like if your organization in the past, like if you're out there having executive level conversations about what is our agency going to look like this fall, just make sure that you're communicating that you're having those communications, right? Transparency is going to be really key so that people have some clue about what's happening, or have an iota, right, that at least the conversations are happening. Or even better, bring people in on those conversations, okay? So that transparency and communication, and decentralizing both the communication and the decision-making moving forward, I think is going to be really key, right? So are there ways that you as people leaders, right, can truly empower your workers in ways you've never done before, right? Really thinking of ways to innovate, even when it just comes to building morale, right? Who are those people on your team who can take that over, right? Who are the people on your team who have, you can redeploy, who are doing one task yesterday, but can do another task tomorrow, right? So really think of ways to kind of decentralize communication, decentralize decision-making, and also really reach out in your communications. Like go, you know, the 2nd degree, 3rd degree, 4th degree levels of communication. I think it was Sandy who remarked earlier in terms of, right, that idea of separation of personal and professional. Throw it out, it's gone, right? We have to redefine what that is, right? I was always one of those people, I did not want to hear about your kids' soccer game when I was at the lunch table, right? But I've got to be open to that now, right? I have to be a part of our conversations, right? The kids are going to be in the back of the camera. My dogs are going to bark any minute now. We have to be accepting of that. We have to find ways of encouraging it, embracing it. You know, I was just working with a client organization the other day that's starting a skip manager program, right? Where they previously, you know, it was just kind of in their corporate culture, you would never talk to anybody about an organizational issue other than your manager. And they're now embedding intentional conversations with skip managers, reaching down 1, 2, even 3 levels, just to have check-ins, right? To talk to people about what's going on, right? So expanding those communication circles, I think, is going to be really important. And one last thought in terms of the communication component would be, you know, just take time to check in with people, right? At that really superhuman level, right? I joked about the soccer game, but, you know, in a really meaningful, authentic way. And make sure that your teams are really prepared to be able to do this, right? To have authentic conversations about how is your mental health, right? How are you feeling today? Are you prepared to do your tasks? You know, I think even just daily check-ins and just set aside 5 minutes to just talk human to human before you get into the tasks, right? Before you move on with things is critical right now. You know, there's still so much, you know, I think denial and kind of inability to accept the change that's happening, the more that we can help each other in that kind of compassionate place of helping people through the denial, the better. When we kind of think about compassion in terms of a people leader perspective, I think the biggest challenge that I've seen with my clients has really been about like priorities, right? What are the things that really need to get done? What is the quality of the service that needs to be provided? And the kind of consistent kind of personal challenge that I've heard from people is, right, they don't want to dumb it down, right? They don't want to expect less of people. And the conversations that I've been having are really encouraging people to reframe that, right? That this isn't about lowering expectations. It's that we need to change our expectations for our new reality, right? And again, the more that we can be upfront and plan for those expectations, right, the better, right? So really kind of challenge yourself, right? Like, does that staff report really need to be done, right? Or does the staff report really need to be 5 pages? Maybe it can be 2 paragraphs, or even the simplest little changes right now, I think can make a big difference. And especially again, when you're looking to the future, right? Try to create as much certainty around what happens 3 months from now, 6 months from now, as you can, right? So adjusting those future expectations, my hope is, right, will help kind of center people a little more around kind of where they go from here, right? Kind of what next steps can be. So, right, that's my hope, right? With a little more of that kind of compassionate approach that you've already been showing, just keep amping it up. Now's the time to double down on it. Don't back off, increase it. And hopefully, right, a few months from now, we'll find a new normal, right? We'll find a new pace in terms of how we communicate with our teams. I'll stop there, Charlie, and let me know your thoughts.
Well, that is a terrific base, and I've got a number of questions that have kind of come through, but I want to play then, Scott, off of what you just were sharing. So everybody had these experience and that the jerk and the shift into something different. And I think, as you indicated, there isn't really anybody can definitively say, when does this end? It's not like a fire. It's not like an earthquake. We all have terrific resiliency plans for those kinds of natural disasters or financial disaster. I think the question I want to ask of all of the panelists is, you've talked about what you're doing with and for your employees and how you're working through it. How have your employees responded? What kind of feedback are you getting from employees? I'm going to open all the mics up.
I'll start. It's been really positive. And, you know, it's, again, just going back to the culture, the trust, they appreciate how much we care about their safety. They understand different situations for different groups of employees. But really the resounding thing is they're very thankful that we are looking out for the safety of theirs and their family. And productivity hasn't suffered. People haven't been taking advantage. I know that most of the employees would like to come back because they do miss each other. It was kind of sad leading up to the stay home. And as we were transitioning to our stay home, I can tell people were just sort of hovering because they knew that they weren't going to see each other for a while. So they clearly miss each other, and they appreciate the little things that we do to keep us connected. When we do virtual all hands on Microsoft Teams, you have the chat feature, and you got to be careful what you put on the chat, right? But it was really positive to see everyone's comment and everyone appreciating each other and missing each other. So that was a way to converse. But the response has been very positive. The board members have been very supportive, and they appreciate how things are going. Our customers, again, we transitioned a lot of our services to allow for online access, so they were appreciative. So all the things that the panelists and we talked about really does make a difference, because in every aspect, the response have been positive.
Diane, how about you guys?
Yeah, I would actually echo what Joone said. The employees here are just trying to find ways to reach out. So you'll find very creative Zoom meetings that actually have some fun, like Joone was talking about, in terms of a scavenger hunt within your house and whoever gets there first. But I think the employees overall definitely feel that we're looking out for them. They're very thankful for what we've been doing, and they're finding new ways to connect. And they do miss each other, but they're finding ways through Twitter, through Teams, through Zoom to keep in touch with each other. And it's actually something that's very, very positive from my perspective.
Sandy, how about your guys?
Yeah, I would echo those comments, and I think it's been an opportunity for managers to engage with employees in a much different way, of and have communications they would not have had we been in the office in the normal environment. And I think it's built another level of connection. I'd also like to say that we're, forced by the working mode to manage much more to achieving goals as opposed to micromanaging. And I think the employees have very much appreciated that. I would also say that on the weekly teleconference that I have, employees can send in questions or comments. And so everybody's had a means to express themselves. And I think that's been really greatly appreciated. So I think in terms of the communication and the bonding, we're at a different level than we were before. You go in and have conversations with people more on a transactional basis, quite frankly. And now it's much more about getting to know the individual a bit, checking in on their well-being, and then going after the work issues. So it's had some positives.
Yeah, let me follow up on that, because I do have a question here as you're talking about the modification of the workforce, most working from home, those who still have to come in. The question I have is whether or not you've also adjusted hours. Have you modified that from a 40-hour work week down to, say, 30, 32? Any alterations in the number of hours people work?
This is Diane. I can actually just start the conversation because I think there's a lot of things being discussed here. There's two reasons to do that. One is sanity, like we were talking about, Blur's Day is what we call every day these days. We actually have not done it as a cost saving measure. We've done it as a empowerment to our employees based on their exhaustion or their childcare needs. So if they can't get a full 40 hours of work in, we don't hold that down accountable to them, because we know this is a very unique situation. And they might have two spouses working in the same house with children trying to do online school, and the network went down. So we have to be flexible and not worry so much about putting in your 40 hours. Just make sure you get the productivity out of them somehow.
Anybody else? How you've experienced that, any modification in work hours? I actually experience it on the other end. I find most of the people I talk to, because they're at home, tend to be overworking as opposed to underworking, because they feel like they're behind, and they're actually finding themselves without that commute they're spending more time at the computer, more time doing the job than they would if they were under a normal schedule back and forth.
That's been our experience as well, Charlie. And I also think that that because they can do things here and there, they're willing to be more accessible at different times. And so it's been a good balance. I think the hardest thing has been for the people working at home that have school-age children. And in fact, we just heard that there may be Saturday school starting now, because that way parents are not working, presumably, and available to help their kids with schoolwork. So there's just tremendous pressure. And I think just having some grace with folks in the process, as opposed to rescheduling work schedules, has worked for us.
So let me stay with that for a second on this issue of the motivation and the accountability. Each of you spoke to some degree about that. One thing to motivate, how have you modified your operations to get the accountability? Because it's, as I think, Scott, as you said, it's, compassion is very important. There are going to be those, particularly in boards of directors, say, okay, are we still getting the job done? How are we assuring, particularly in that culture shift, those that are, if you're not at the desk, you must be out goofing off. But how are we, how do you balance the motivation and accountability, and have you found new tools for accountability?
I'll kind of start off, because I always encourage staff to think broadly. What more can we do just beyond our core function and our core mission? Because if there's an opportunity to add value, then we do that. So we do a lot of different things, but this has completely changed that lens. And I think all the speakers talked about reevaluating our priorities. And so my priorities went from doing all these things to safety of our employees, safety of our customers. All the work that's critical in meeting those needs we do, but everything else gets modified. So when you look at even scheduled maintenance, people are home now and they can't go without water for hours because they got kids or what have you. So we are deferring a lot of maintenance work that are not critical, just so that we don't impact the quality of life and their daily routine. So that has its impact, and we know that. But also because we have our field crew split into 2 teams, I don't have my full complement of employees out there to do some other work. So we have to really look at our capital improvement program, our maintenance work, and really say, what are the absolutes that we need to do right now, given our circumstances? So that's one of the different ways that we look. And that's true for our other efforts that we have. When it comes to our communication efforts to the public, we really narrowed it down to promoting the safety of water, encourage them to use all the online features that we offer, and then also when not to flush down the toilet. And all these other communications about workshop, water use efficiency, all these other things, we've definitely scaled it down. Because right now with so much out there with news and information, we don't want to create confusion. We recognize and respect the public's priority, which is number one, their health. And so we toned a lot of our efforts and the way we work to really look at the core critical and then hold those things very accountable through this daily communication with all the management leads and then talking with all the employees. We also have a separate meeting just for supervisors. And these kinds of check-in allows us to see how we are performing at sort of this programmatic and project level, but also how all the staff is doing, and we're able to hold ourselves accountable. But as Scott talked about, I had to adjust my expectation. And I also had to really clearly communicate that to the staff, because they know that I asked for a lot. And for me to say, okay, this is different now, this is what we're focusing on, and these are what we have to do. I want them to really believe that that is what I mean. And so it's been a very interesting time for us, and it's been actually a great learning thing for me.
So let me ask this, because we're coming close to our time, but I want to make sure that I get this, and you've all been very generous in focusing on your organizations and what very creative things, innovative things you've done with them. Where do you pull examples for motivation? What do you do to make sure that you're getting the feedback that you need, taking care of yourselves, but then lessons that you can then translate back to your employees? Sandy, I mean, you talked a little bit about, I'm sorry, Diane, go ahead. I'm going to ask Sandy.
I was actually...
You mentioned Brene Brown. That triggered my thoughts. Like, okay, where are you guys going for this stuff?
Yeah, I think Brene Brown is a huge inspiration for me. Doing a lot of reading, listening to various podcasts, really scanning the environment there's a lot of things available online with this crisis to help people get through. And really doing that for myself so that I can give it back to the employees. If you're not taking care of you, you can't take care of the organization. And that's a hard thing for us as leaders to sometimes recognize. And so I'm really trying to be mindful of that. Also trying to make sure that I carve out a little bit of time for some personal exercise and focus on me time. Again, very hard to do when you're working from home, but critical. And it helps with the exhaustion. And I think it's even more critical now that we know that this event is going to continue, and in my view, probably will continue through the end of the calendar year. So to Scott's point, people are hitting that fatigue point. You're over the excitement of it happening and getting moving and into a new mode. And now it's kind of like, oh, shoot, this is going to go on for a while. So we need to make sure we keep ourselves going.
So very quickly, Diane, anything you want to wrap before we go? We're just coming up on our time.
Well, I just want to say one thing, and it goes back to the questions you were asking earlier. This crisis has helped us understand how important our management principles are. And being observant of your employees is a way to stay motivated and engaged. And when you were in the office with them, you could walk down the hall and see what they were doing. You can't do that now. So you have to find other ways to observe so that you can keep them engaged. And I think you've heard a lot of ideas here today about how to use technology to do that, which will continue to keep them productive in this crisis for as long as it lasts.
Well, I want to say thank you to each of you. This has been very instructive, and I really, really very much do appreciate. Much like your organizations, obviously, as a nonprofit and as a group that loves to get people together for the camaraderie, Joone, that you talked about, our shift to doing events and connectivity like this has been part of our shift, but we're hoping that these things are valuable and people see these as opportunities to do things a little bit differently. I do want to answer a question where the program today and the materials that were used are all going to be on our website at socalwater.org. Give us 24 to 72 hours to make sure we get everything posted, because we want to make sure it goes up correctly. And I do want to also say this is the second in a series of these Trust Matters webinars. Our next program will be on May 28th. We're going to focus on finance. Nobody can operate an organization without the ability to finance what we're putting people on the streets and making the repairs and doing the infrastructure upgrades we need to. So we've got a great panel on the 28th. Again, Scott, Sandy, Diane, and Joone, thank you so very much for being with us. And for those that joined us today, thank you. We look forward to seeing you on the 28th. Thanks very much, everybody.
Stay
Thank you.
safe.